fascinated with the moon, maybe even obsessed with the moon for quite some time. It enters a lot of my works, not only these works in the show, but I've made work to do with the moon across lots of different areas, and if not the moon, about space and deep time. I've been fascinated by it because I think it's such an ancient, beautiful being in the sky, but somehow every time you look at it, it seems new at the same time. It's so fresh and pure, and it's always there reminding you of the rest of the universe. I think for me, the moon is a little bit like a trampoline for the imagination. You can jump off it and then you can leap off into the rest of the universe. So it kind of reminds you that we're a planet, it's a planet, and think about what's beyond it. So the light from the moon has always been a big inspiration, and that's where I began with making this light bulb. So the light bulb simulates moonlight as closely as we could possibly make it. It's a really ordinary, everyday light bulb, just like you would find in DIY stores, but it accurately simulates the quality of a full moon. I wanted to make it a little bit like daylight bulbs, that you get artists use them a lot, and to try to create almost like a standardized moonlight. So I approached a lighting engineer, a remarkable man in Osram, Dieter Lang, and asked him, could you possibly use the same processes to create daylight, but to try to recreate moonlight? So he did so. He did many different experiments and tests, and he took measurements under a full moon in Munich one night, and to the brightness, the luminosity, the colour, the temperature, and then bit by bit he experimented in the laboratory and tried to recreate moonlight.
What's special about moonlight?
I always thought it was almost an impossible task, and it was an impossible task because moonlight's like nothing else. It's really ineffable, it's like intangible, we're so used to it in one way, but it's so magical in another. It's really wondrous kind of light. It's soft, but it can also be very bright, but you can't even read under moonlight. Colours alter under moonlight, shapes, shadows, everything becomes a little bit obscure, a bit strange. Moonlight is the sunlight reflected, so it's travelled from the sun to the moon and back, and I think it also depends where you are on the earth. If you're in a city, you're going to have a different experience of moonlight. If you're somewhere with very dark skies, it's can be so clear and bright, and a harvest moon can be the most incredible, or super moon, lunar eclipse. There's just all these different experiences of the moon. And I think what I love also is how it's changing all the time, from new moon, and the cycles of the moon do affect our lives. And so it's both this mysterious, distant object that's quite remote and outside ourselves, but yet we're really connected to it because it affects the tides, it affects even the way the blood moves in our body. And actually, it maybe used to be part of the Earth, the moon. Apparently, there's ideas that it got, ejected from the Earth at some point. So I think it's truly is bonded with us, and I think maybe that's why we feel this deep connection with it. But I also love how untouched it seems. Even though obviously humans have been there, and goodness knows what the future holds. But at the moment, it just has this absolute purity about it, and you kind of feel like it just makes you stop and pause, and it's like this blank canvas almost, where you can just imagine, the rest of space and time, and kind of proportionally think about how you relate to the wider space and the universe, and it's distant, but it's also close, and I think that's why I'm drawn to it, and why so many other people can connect with the moon. It is our moon. Yeah, I used the moon to beam a piece of music back to Earth. I used it like a reflector, actually, like a mirror. And I heard of a technology where you could send a message to the moon in Morse code, and when it came back to Earth, it was somehow altered by the moon's surface. And I loved that idea because it was a little bit like the moon was taking part in a conversation where you could send a message and it would send it back, but it had somehow reconstructed what you'd sent. And because it was Morse code, you could send any message in Morse code. I thought, well, fantastic, that could be a drawing, it could be anything that's broken down into code, but what about a piece of music? And I thought, let's send Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, let's beam it from the moon, and when it comes back, the moon will have altered the piece of music and will make it into a new score, and the pieces that get lost in the moon or that get refracted off into space, they will be missing when you listen back to it. And those absences will become quite present because it's that's the moon talking silently, and I quite like with it plays on a self-playing grand piano, and I feel a little bit like the moon is in the room with you when it's playing because it doesn't have a person performing it. It's coming from this automated piano, and those fragments that you hear, the lost parts, that feels a little bit like it's coming from the moon itself. And it's quite a melancholy piece of music, the sonata. So I like that you're listening to it, you recognise it instantly, it's such a recognisable piece of music, and then you think, oh, what's that? Is something wrong, or is something's gone a little bit off, and then suddenly there's whole chords that are missing, and then towards the end of the piece it goes, really fragmented, and then you find out, it's been to the moon, But the moon seems like quite a lonely place as well. It's a place of dreams and wonder, but of course it's uninhabited. So I think for me, that's why it's so rich for the imagination. As mountains and craters and active geology, but there's no life on it. So when you imagine the moon, you can kind of project that life onto there. It's barren and empty, and you can imagine the wind on the moon, the solar wind, the atmosphere, the light. I like to even imagine what's the sunset like on the moon. I think what I love about it is it's both totally perfect and imperfect, at the same time.